The forest was silent after the crash. Smoke curled upward from the twisted wreck of a silver sedan, its headlights flickering weakly through the rain. A lone German shepherd stood by the roadside, ears flat, breath misting in the cold night air. His fur was streaked with mud and glass dust, his amber eyes fixed on the girl slumped over the steering wheel. She moved barely. A tremor passed through her hand. The dog stepped closer, whining low, something primal in his gaze. Moments later, he vanished into the dark woods, dragging her broken body with him. Rain fell in uneven bursts, like the sky was unsure whether to cry or rage. Each drop hit the crumpled metal of the sedan with a sound that could have been mistaken for whispering, quiet, steady, unnerving. The forest road had no name. Locals just called it Miller's Bend, a lonely stretch that cut through pines so thick even the moon struggled to get in. And that night, the only witness to what happened was a stray K9 German shepherd named Shadow. He had belonged to someone once. His collar, now frayed and half-torn, still bore the letters K9-31, a ghost of a duty long over. He was a working dog, or had been, until something broke between him and his handler. Now, he wandered the back roads, hunting for scraps and ghosts. The sound of the crash came like thunder. Metal shrieked. Tires screamed. Then silence. Shadow froze, his ears twitching. His body tensed. He began to run, not out of curiosity, but instinct. Something inside him, that old training buried deep in muscle and memory, ignited. When he reached the wreck, he found her. The girl, maybe 20, maybe younger, was slumped forward, her hair matted with rain and blood. The airbags had burst, white fabric stained crimson. Steam hissed from the hood, curling around the car like breath from a dying animal. Shadow approached carefully, sniffing the air. He smelled oil, gasoline, and blood. Lots of it. The girl stirred weakly, a faint sound leaving her lips. Help! The word was almost a ghost. Shadow barked, once, sharp and loud, but there was no one around to hear. No cars, no lights, just the dark woods and the endless rain. He whined, pacing. Then, as if deciding something, he pushed his nose under her arm, tugging gently. She didn't move. He tried again, harder this time. The car groaned, metal shifting. Her leg was pinned. Shadow growled low, frustrated. He clawed at the ground, pulled, tugged, until finally, with a wet metallic crack, her leg came free. She slumped sideways, limp as a rag doll. Shadow backed up, trembling, then gripped her jacket collar with his teeth and started dragging her toward the trees. It was slow, brutal work. Her boots caught on roots. Her arm dangled lifelessly in the mud. But Shadow kept going, panting hard, rain dripping from his muzzle. The forest swallowed them both, and the car was left behind, glowing faintly in the dark like a broken lantern. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The girl lay on a bed of damp leaves, wrapped in the remnants of a torn blanket Shadow had found near an old campsite. She was alive? Barely. Her breathing came shallow, uneven. Shadow paced near her, restless. His fur was slick with mud, his eyes alert to every sound. Once, a branch cracked somewhere in the woods, and he froze, hackles raised. When she woke, it was with a gasp. She blinked up at the gray light filtering through the trees, her face pale, her lips trembling. "W, where am I?" she whispered. Shadow stepped closer, ears perked. She stared at him for a moment, confusion, fear, disbelief. A dog! He lowered his head slightly, tail barely moving. Then she remembered the crash, the road, the screaming metal, her phone gone, her purse gone. She lifted her hand and hissed as pain shot through her arm. It was bruised, swollen, probably fractured. Shadow sniffed at her hand, then gently nudged it back down, as if telling her to stop. Something inside her cracked. She started to cry, quietly, shaking. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked, voice breaking. "Why not anywhere else?" Shadow didn't answer, of course. He only turned his head toward the deeper part of the forest, where the light barely reached. By afternoon, she tried to move. Every muscle screamed. Her leg, the one pinned in the wreck, was numb. The air smelled of pine and decay, heavy with the damp scent of moss. She found a name for herself again, Lena. It came back slowly, like something rising through dark water. Shadow stayed close, watching. He'd disappear into the trees every now and then, returning with something, an old tarp, a piece of cloth, a dead rabbit. He dropped the rabbit near her, tail wagging slightly. Lena recoiled. Jesus, no. I can't. But her stomach twisted painfully. She hadn't eaten in nearly a day. Later that evening, she tore off a strip of the rabbit's cooked flesh. Shadow had somehow dragged it near a patch of smoldering embers, probably from an old fire pit. She didn't ask how. She just ate. When night fell again, the forest turned to liquid darkness. Every sound seemed amplified. The hoot of an owl, the rustle of unseen creatures, the whisper of wind through branches that sounded almost like voices. Lena couldn't sleep. Her thoughts kept looping. Why here? Why would a dog drag her into the woods instead of toward the road? Was he lost? Trained to hide victims? No, that made no sense. Shadow sat a few feet away, his eyes glowing faint amber in the dim light. Watching. Always watching. Then, somewhere deep in the woods, a sound broke the quiet. A branch snapped, heavy, deliberate. Lena stiffened. Shadow rose instantly, teeth bared, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Who's there?" she whispered. The sound came again, closer this time. Footsteps, slow, crunching through the wet leaves. Shadow moved forward, body low, tail stiff. He barked once, twice. The sound echoed through the trees. Then a voice answered. "Easy there, boy." Lena's heart skipped. It was a man's voice. Calm, deep, steady, too calm. A figure emerged from the trees. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a forest ranger's jacket. His beard was unkempt, his eyes unreadable. "You're hurt," he said simply, stepping into the faint light. Lena stared. "Who are you?" "Name's Jonas. Ranger for this district." He knelt down, studying her leg. "Looks bad. You're lucky he found you." He nodded toward Shadow. The dog's ears flicked, but he didn't move. Jonas smiled faintly. "Old K-9 unit, huh? You picked the right hero." He reached for his radio. "Signal's dead here. We'll need to move closer to the ridge. I can carry you." Something in his tone didn't sit right. Too easy. Too slow. Lena hesitated. You said you're a ranger?" "Yeah." He showed his badge briefly, but only long enough for her to see the flash of metal. "Been here 15 years. Nobody else works this sector." Shadow growled again. Jonas frowned. "He's protective, huh?" "He doesn't trust you," Lena whispered. Jonas looked at her, and in that brief silence, something flickered in his eyes. Cold, calculated. "Well," he said softly, "he's smart." By nightfall, Jonas had built a small fire. He'd insisted Lena stay by it to keep warm, while he went to scout for help. Shadow followed him. When he returned, alone, his jacket was damp and muddy. "No luck," he said. "Road's still a mile out. We'll try in the morning." Lena nodded weakly, her body trembling. Shadow stayed pressed close to her side now, silent but tense. Jonas poked the fire absently, the flames painting his face in shifting orange. "You know," he said quietly, "this part of the forest used to be government property. They ran some kind of training program here. Military dogs. Men, too, sometimes. The locals don't talk about it much." Lena frowned. "Why not?" He shrugged. "People went missing. Strange stories. But that's just old superstition, right?" Shadow's head lifted slightly, his eyes narrowing. Jonas smiled faintly at the reaction. "Guess the dog remembers." The silence that followed felt wrong. Too heavy. Then, out of nowhere, Shadow lunged, teeth flashing, snarling. Jonas barely jerked back in time. "Whoa, what the hell?" Lena screamed, trying to pull the dog back. But he wouldn't stop. He was attacking not from rage, but from fear. A desperate, animal kind of fear. Jonas stumbled backward, his hand going instinctively to his pocket. And in that second, Lena saw it. A knife. She froze. Jonas caught her stare, his jaw tightening. "You shouldn't have seen that." Shadow barked, snapping his teeth. Jonas took a step closer. You don't understand, do you? Nobody's supposed to be out here. Not anymore. Lena's breath hitched. What do you mean? He smiled, small, cruel. That dog wasn't lost. He was abandoned. For a reason. Before she could speak, Shadow lunged again, faster this time. The fire kicked up sparks. Jonas fell backward, the knife slicing air. And somewhere in the chaos, in the sound of barking, screaming, breaking branches, Lena heard it. Not just the dog's growl, but something else. Something moving in the woods. Something that shouldn't still be alive. The rain returned before dawn, soft but relentless. It whispered to the pines and hissed against the dying fire, washing away the blood that had already darkened the leaves. Lena lay half awake, trembling beneath the tarp, her pulse still echoing the chaos from hours before. Every sound, every snap of wood, every rush of wind made her flinch. Shadow was gone. She called for him weakly. Shadow? Her voice disappeared into the trees. No answer, no movement, only the slow, rhythmic drip of water from the branches. Then came a sound she could mistake. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, coming from behind her. Lena turned her head, heart pounding. Jonas. He stepped out from behind a cluster of ferns, face streaked with dirt, shirt torn. His left arm was bleeding. Deep rag bite marks. You got a strong dog, he muttered, voice hoarse. Lena's throat went dry. Where is he? Jonas smirked faintly. Ran off after he did this. Probably bleeding out somewhere. They all do eventually. You hurt him? Her voice cracked. He looked at her evenly. He hurt me first. Lena stared. Tried to gauge if he was telling the truth. His expression didn't waver. Calm. Controlled. Like someone who'd been through this before, many times. He crouched near the fire, coaxing the embers back to life. The orange light flared briefly, revealing his eyes, cold, focused. You shouldn't have come here, he said. This forest isn't safe. Lena swallowed. You said you were a ranger. I am, he replied quietly, feeding another branch into flames. But this isn't my jurisdiction anymore. It hasn't been for years. She frowned. Then why are you here? Jonas looked up at her, the corner of his mouth twitching. Not quite a smile. Because I never left. Hours passed. The rain faded to mist. Jonas helped her sit up, his movements oddly gentle, almost rehearsed. He tied her injured leg with a strip of cloth, his hands steady, precise. You worked in the military? Lena asked softly, more to fill the silence than anything. His gaze lingered on the knot he was tightening. Something like that. Before I was a ranger, I worked on a training program. Dogs, soldiers, behavioral conditioning. Lena's mind flickered to Shadow, his strange intelligence, his eerie calm, his scars. You mean like him? Jonas didn't answer. Shadow, she said again. That was his name. You said he was abandoned. For a reason. What'd you mean? He looked up slowly. You really want to know? Lena nodded. Jonas leaned back on his heels, staring into the fire. The orange light made the rain on his skin look like glass. They weren't ordinary dogs. They were engineered, conditioned for search and rescue, but it went further. Obedience beyond instinct. They were trained to identify survivors and eliminate threats. Her stomach tightened. Eliminate? He nodded. One handler, a woman named Crowley, got too close to her dog, broke protocol. The animal snapped, tore half her face off before anyone could stop it. Lena flinched. Jonas looked up, eyes hard. They put the rest down. All except one. He escaped before the sweep. Her heart froze. Shadow. Jonas didn't deny it. He found you, didn't he? His tone changed, lower, almost accusing. Dragged you out here instead of the road. That's not rescue behavior. That's containment. Lena shook her head. No, he saved me. Jonas smiled thinly. You sure? By midday, Lena could stand with help. Jonas insisted they move, said the ridge wasn't far. He kept glancing behind them. scanning the trees like something might be following. The woods grew denser as they climbed. Mist clung low to the ground, wrapping around their legs like smoke. Every tree looked the same, black trunks, pale moss, no sign of civilization anywhere. "Where exactly are we going?" she asked, struggling to keep up. "There's an old outpost near the ridge," Jonas said. "Radio's dead, but there might still be supplies." Shadow's absence gnawed at her. She imagined him lying somewhere in the rain, bleeding out. The thought made her chest ache. Then, faintly from behind, came a bark. Lena stopped instantly. "That's him." Jonas froze. His jaw tightened. "No. Stay quiet." Another bark, louder this time. Desperate, Lena turned, trying to see through the mist. "He's looking for me." "Lena," Jonas said sharply, "don't." But she was already moving, limping toward the sound. Jonas cursed under his breath and followed. They emerged into a clearing, ringed by massive oaks. In the center, an old wooden cabin leaned against itself, half collapsed. The door hung open. Shadow stood in front of it, covered in mud, limping but alive. When he saw her, he barked once, then turned toward the open doorway. "See," Lena whispered, smiling through tears. He found. Her words stopped. Inside the cabin, something moved. A shadow shifted behind the doorframe. Tall, thin, human. Jonas stepped in front of her instantly, his hand on the knife. "Stay behind me." The figure stepped out slowly. It was a woman, or what was left of one. Her clothes were tattered, soaked through. Her face, half of it was gone, smooth scar tissue running from jaw to brow. One eye was milky white, the other sharp as glass. "Jonas," she rasped, her voice raw. "You shouldn't have come back." Lena's stomach dropped. "Who?" Jonas didn't move. His voice was low, almost reverent. "Crowley." The woman's gaze drifted to the dog. "You found him." Shadow whined softly. Crowley stepped closer, ignoring the knife in Jonas's hand. "He remembered me." Jonas's grip tightened. "You were dead." She smiled, a hollow, broken thing. "You tried to make me dead, but your dog wouldn't let you finish." Lena stared at them, heart pounding. "You, too, you were together?" Neither answered. Crowley crouched beside Shadow, her scarred hand trembling as she touched his fur. "You brought her here," she whispered to the dog. "Good boy. You remember the protocol." Lena backed up a step. "Protocol?" Crowley looked at her, and there was something in her eyes that made Lena's blood run cold. "Containment," she said softly. "He brought you here because you weren't supposed to survive." Lena froze. Jonas's voice broke the silence. "Enough." He raised a knife, his face hard. "She's delusional. That project died years ago." Crowley didn't flinch. "You think she's an accident, Jonas? You think the forest brought her here by chance?" Her gaze turned to Lena. "You were on Miller's Bend. That road's been closed for months. No GPS signal. No lights. Tell me, girl, how'd you end up there?" Lena stammered. I took a wrong turn." Crowley smiled faintly. "Did you? Or were you sent?" Jonas lunged before she could say more. The knife flashed, a blur of metal. But Shadow leapt between them, his teeth sinking into Jonas's arm again. The blade dropped. "Run," Crowley shouted. Lena didn't think. She just ran. Branches whipped her face. Thorns tore at her jacket. Behind her, she heard shouting, then silence, then a single gunshot. She stumbled down a ravine, half sliding, half falling, until she hit the bottom and lay gasping in the mud. For a long time, there was nothing but the sound of rain. Then, soft, deliberate footsteps above her. Shadow appeared at the ridge, panting, blood on his fur. He trotted down toward her, limping but alive. Lena wrapped her arms around him, sobbing. "We have to get out of here." But Shadow didn't move. He stood facing the trees, body tense, growling low. Lena followed his gaze. Through the mist, a shape emerged, slow, deliberate. Jonas. He was holding the gun now, his arm bleeding, his eyes wild. "You don't get it," he shouted, his voice breaking. "They'll kill us all for this." "Jonas! She was supposed to die. That was the deal." Shadow barked, stepping between them. Jonas raised the gun. The sound that followed wasn't thunder, but it might as well have been. The bullet struck Shadow in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He fell with a sharp yelp, his body jerking once. Lena screamed, throwing herself over him. "Stop, please." Jonas hesitated, shaking, the gun wavering in his hand. "You don't understand what's in these woods." A new voice cut through the rain. "I do." "Crowley." Jonas turned, too slow. The second shot echoed, sharper, cleaner. Jonas crumpled, the gun falling from his hand. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Crowley limped toward them, her face pale, her breathing ragged. She knelt beside Shadow, her fingers trembling as she checked his pulse. "He'll live," she whispered. "He's stronger than the rest." Lena looked at her through tears. What were you people doing here?" Crowley's gaze drifted to the trees. "Not training dogs. Training obedience." And when the program failed, they buried it, along with everyone who knew too much. She looked back at Lena, eyes hollow. "You shouldn't have survived that crash." "But he," she nodded at Shadow, "had other plans." Lena's voice broke. "Why me?" Crowley didn't answer. She just stared at the dog, her voice almost tender. "Because you reminded him of me. That night, the three of them camped beneath the ridge." Crowley's wound reopened. She pressed a hand to it, whispering nonsense to the flames. Lena sat beside Shadow, stroking his fur. His breathing was shallow but steady. "You saved me," she whispered, "even when they told you not to." The dog's eyes fluttered open briefly. He leaned his head against her arm. Somewhere far off, an owl called once, then stopped. The forest was silent again, but not empty. It listened, and in that silence, Lena understood. The woods didn't just remember. They waited. The dawn came cold and colorless. The trees stood like sentinels, dripping with last night's rain. Mist hung low over the ridge, turning everything pale and dreamlike, except the blood. That no mist could hide. Lena woke to silence. The fire had burned down to ash. Crowley was gone. For a moment, she thought it had all been a nightmare. The crash, Jonas, the gunshots, the secrets, until she saw Shadow lying beside her, his fur still matted with dried blood. "Hey!" she whispered, touching his muzzle. His ear twitched faintly. He was alive. Barely. Lena tore a strip from her jacket, pressing it against the wound on his shoulder. Her fingers shook from the cold, or maybe from fear. She didn't know which anymore. The forest was too quiet. No birds, no insects. Just a faint hum of wind through the pines. Then she saw the footprints, Crowley's, leading away from the camp toward the ridge. "Stay here," Lena whispered to Shadow, though she knew he wouldn't understand. She forced herself to stand, her injured leg screaming in protest, and followed the tracks. The trail wound upward through thick undergrowth. The higher she climbed, the more she felt the air change. Thinner, colder, heavy with something metallic. At the top of the ridge stood an old concrete structure half buried in moss and roots. Its walls were cracked, its roof caved in, but the steel door, rusted and dented, still held. Crowley's prints ended there. Lena pressed her ear to the door. Faint echoes. A woman's voice, Crowley's, murmuring words she couldn't make out. "Crowley?" Lena called softly. The voice stopped. Then, after a pause, "You shouldn't be here." Lena pushed the door. It groaned open, the hinges shrieking like something alive. Inside, the air smelled of mold and metal. The floor was littered with broken glass and old files, their ink blurred into ghosts. Faded stenciling on the wall read, "Project Cerberus, Facility 04. Lena stepped inside. "You said this place was gone." Crowley stood in the center of the room, a small generator humming beside her, casting a dim yellow glow. She held a stack of papers, her fingers trembling. "They tried to erase it," Crowley said, "but the forest doesn't forget." Lena's eyes drifted to the far wall, lined with cages. Empty now, but she could still see scratch marks, dark stains. What did you do here? Lena whispered. Crowley didn't look up. We created loyalty. We thought we could shape instinct, turn fear into obedience. They obeyed every command until the day they didn't. She finally turned toward Lena. You've seen what happens when obedience breaks. Lena thought a shadow dragging her from the wreck, not to the road, but to the woods. You mean he brought me here on purpose? Crowley nodded. He remembered this place. Maybe he thought bringing you here would fix what we broke. Fix? Lena's voice cracked. I almost died. Crowley smiled faintly, a sadness in her eyes. So did he? Every time they made him choose between saving and killing, a part of him broke. You're the first person he saved without command. Lena stared at her, realization dawning. You're saying he disobeyed. Crowley nodded slowly. That's what makes him dangerous. A low growl echoed from outside. Crowley stiffened. He followed you. Shadow. No, her voice dropped. Jonas. Lena's stomach turned to ice. He's dead. Crowley shook her head. Not unless you shot him through the heart. And I didn't. The growl came again, closer this time, deeper, almost animal. Crowley grabbed Lena's arm. There's a maintenance tunnel behind the cages. Go. Now. What about you? I'll hold him off. Lena hesitated, torn between fear and guilt. You can't. Go. Crowley shoved her toward the back wall. Lena stumbled through the narrow tunnel, her breath ragged. The air was thick with dust and rust. Behind her, she heard shouting, then a gunshot, then silence. She kept crawling until the tunnel opened into a hollow beneath the ridge. That's where she found Shadow. He was standing, barely, his body trembling, eyes wild. His fur bristled. Teeth bared toward the sound behind her. Jonas's silhouette filled the tunnel entrance. His clothes were soaked, his face pale and blood-smeared. He looked less like a man and more like something dragged back from a grave. You think you can hide down here? His voice was hoarse, trembling. You don't know what's in those files. What they made me do. Lena backed up slowly, pressing a hand to Shadow's neck. You killed for them, didn't you? He laughed bitterly. We all did, but I was smart enough to keep my leash. He raised a gun. That dog isn't saving anyone this time. Shadow moved first. The growl started deep in his chest, a raw, broken sound. Then he lunged. The shot went off, deafening in the tunnel. The bullet ricocheted off concrete, sparks flying. Jonas fell backward, the gun clattering away. Shadow's teeth sank into his shoulder, pinning him down. Jonas screamed, slamming a fist into the dog's head. Shadow! Lena shouted. Stop! The dog froze, panting, shaking, eyes locked on Jonas. Jonas reached for a knife at his belt. Lena grabbed a rusted metal rod from the ground and swung. The blade clattered away. Jonas's eyes widened, not from fear, but disbelief. You're just like them, he hissed. Lena didn't answer. She was shaking too hard to speak. Shadow released his grip, stepping back. Jonas slumped against the wall, gasping. You think he saved you, Jonas said weakly. He didn't. He's protecting what's left of his programming. You're just familiar. Lena frowned. Familiar? Jonas smiled faintly, blood running from his mouth. You look like Crowley used to, before he tore her apart. The words hit like a blade. Lena stared at Shadow, the dog's trembling frame, his torn ear, the old scars that crossed his muzzle. His gaze met hers, soft and uncertain, almost human. No, she whispered. He's not like that anymore. Jonas tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. You can't change what he is. Shadow stepped forward slowly, then stopped inches from Jonas's face. For a long, silent moment, the two of them just stared at each other, the man who had trained monsters and the last monster left. Then Shadow turned away. Jonas exhaled, almost relieved. That's right. Obedience. You remember your... The growl came again. One final sound, deep, low, and final. When it was over, the forest was quiet once more. By the time Lena dragged herself out of the tunnel, the sun was setting. Smoke curled up from a ridge, the remains of the generator, the lab, the ghosts of everything buried there. Shadow limped beside her, his fur streaked with ash. Crowley's body was nowhere to be found, only her footprints leading into the trees and then stopping. They walked until the trees thinned and the distant hum of the highway returned. When Lena finally saw headlights, she fell to her knees, sobbing. Shadow pressed against her side, resting his head on her shoulder. The driver, a middle-aged trucker, jumped out, rushing to help. "Jesus, miss, what happened?" Lena tried to speak, but her throat gave out. She just held on to Shadow, her hands buried in his fur. The man crouched, eyes wide. "That dog saved your life, didn't he?" Lena looked at Shadow, those tired amber eyes, still watching her, still waiting for command. She smiled faintly through the tears. "Yeah," she whispered. "He saved me." Weeks later, after the hospital and the police and the endless questions, Lena found herself driving back to the edge of Miller's Bend. The road was open again, cleared, repaved. No sign of the crash. No sign of the forest's secrets. Shadow sat in the passenger seat, healed but quiet. His head rested against the window, eyes fixed on the trees. "You remember, don't you?" Lena said softly. "Everything they did." He turned his head toward her, ears twitching, eyes gentle but unreadable. Lena reached over and scratched behind his ear. "You don't have to remember anymore. We're done." She parked the car near the ridge, stepping out into the cool evening air. The forest stretched endlessly, silent and green. A breeze moved through the trees, almost like a sigh. Lena knelt beside Shadow. "You brought me here for a reason, didn't you?" The dog didn't move, but his gaze lingered on the tree line. She smiled faintly. "It's okay. Whatever was, it's over." They stayed there for a long time, woman and dog, both survivors of something the world would never believe. When the sun dipped below the trees, the light caught in Shadow's eyes, turning them gold, bright, alive, almost human. And somewhere deep in the forest, unseen and silent, a single bark echoed in return.